In the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, either way, you win. Have a stake in the race with ExpressBet.
We begin our Saturday out of the gate with the DRF.com Formulator Race of the Day. Let's take a look at the field for the Grade 1 Kentucky Derby at 1.25 miles for 3-year-olds. Matt Bernier, Mike Beer here, our in-studio handicappers. Will take you through the Grade 1 Kentucky Derby, and our Kentucky Derby Stakes preview is presented by ExpressBet. Remember to head on over to the Race of the Day event page on DRF.com and download those free Formulator past performances and handicap along with us. Gents, the number 14, Classic Empire, last year's 2-year-old champion, the 4-to-1 morning line favorite for the Kentucky Derby. McCracken at 5-to-1, Always Dreaming, Irish War Cry, not far behind. Let's take a look at Classic Empire's most recent race. Matt, it was a very important race. He needed a big effort in the Arkansas Derby, and he came through. He needed to prove that he could still run, because his only other start as a 3-year-old was an unmitigated disaster. He did come through in this spot, particularly maybe if you want to make the argument he was between horses, not all that comfortable. You see him coming here on the outside. He's going to run down Conquest Mo Money. Don't like that he pops back to his left lead, but it was nice to see him get back to the winner's circle. It's been a roller coaster season for Classic Empire. He bombed in his seasonal debut, Mike. He then didn't want to train. He had foot problems. We all know about his behavioral issues. How much stock do you put into that when handicapping a horse like Classic Empire? Do you worry, is he going to behave? Is he not going to behave? Or are you saying, I'm just handicapping off the dope?
I think you have to worry about it a little bit, because it's not like this is just something that, you know, popped up as a new 3-year-old. I mean, this is a horse who, going back to his hopeful as a 2-year-old, where he just decided he was going to make a left turn out of the gate and leave his rider sitting on the ground. So he's always been, you know, one of those headstrong kind of horses. On the other hand, you know, I would be a little concerned about it, but if you're really concerned about the big crowd in the Derby and whether this horse is going to keep himself together, you know, he did win a Breeders' Cup race in front of a huge crowd in Santa Anita, so he can do it. He's a talented horse, one of the more talented 3-year-olds in the country. I don't want him at a short price, but obviously he's a horse that could win this race. Matt, of the other horses coming out of the Arkansas Derby, let's talk about Looking at Lee, a horse that's a true one-run closer that may not be too compromised by this tough inside post. You know he's got one way to go, and that's right to the back. They're going to drop out Corey Lanery. I don't think the one post is going to be any sort of an issue, even though they break directly in line with the inside rail. You're going to take him back. You're going to hope the pace heats up front. He's going to be running on late. The question is, how many pieces can he pick up? Is it going to be enough to hit the board? Mike untrapped a couple of bid hung lines in his last 2 races. Blinkers off for Steve Asmussen. Do you think this distance is a little bit too far? I think it is, and I think the competition probably a little too tough for him as well. I mean, I think he's a pretty good horse, but they've run him in 4 of the Derby prep races now this year, and he did his best in all of them, and he had his chance in all of them, and at the end of the day, he just wasn't good enough. Sonneteer, another late runner. Matt's still a maiden. He's got a lot of work to do, but he's in really good hands with Keith DeZormo. Certainly is, but I feel like he fits everything I just said about Looking at Lee. You know what they're going to do. They're going to take him back, try and make one run. If the pace heats up, he's going to be coming on at the end. If it doesn't, question is how many horses can he clunk past? Second choice on the morning line is McCracken. McCracken comes out of the Bluegrass Stakes won by IRAP. We're going to turn into the stretch right now of the Bluegrass. IRAP, as a maiden, is on the lead. He doesn't change leads in the stretch. He still keeps going. Mike, is this an indictment on this field that IRAP is still able to wire them, or were you willing to say McCracken's just prepping, he'll be way sharper for the Derby? Yeah, a little bit of both, I think. Certainly in McCracken's case, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, but, you know, this entire stretch run, it looked like IRAP was going to get beat, especially with Practical Joke just bearing down on him the entire way. I just kept thinking, well, Practical Joke's going to get him. Oh, he's going to get him now. Oh, now he's going to, and he never got by him. Good for IRAP for winning it. We'll see if he can back that race. So McCracken was the only horse I really wanted to give the benefit of the doubt out of the Bluegrass. I think they were prepping him in there. Matt, were you disappointed with McCracken's race? Because remember, he was going to run in the Tampa Bay Derby, and he had a little minor physical ailment that sent him very briefly to the sidelines, and then he resurfaced in the Bluegrass, and it did kind of look like a prep. But did you want to see a little more running late? No, I have to be honest with you. When you go and watch the entirety of the replay, I think there was a lot of things going on from McCracken. He was a little bit keen early on, and I think that had to do with him being fresh. He hadn't raced since February, and going into the far turn, Joel Rosario was riding Practical Joke. I think he intentionally moved up, not just because it was time to get going in the race, but to kind of hem McCracken in a little bit mid-pack. He did come on with a little bit of a run, McCracken, and he flattened out down the lane. I happen to think it was a perfect prep for a race like this. The question is now, do you think he's good enough?
Mike, for IRAP, the winner of that race, was it simply a situation, all the stars aligned, no speed in the race? He took over a clear lead in the stretch against several horses that were prepping over a track that was kind to speed? Or do you think, listen, this is a very well-bred horse. He's a half despite style by Tiz now. His connections have won the Derby 2 out of the past 5 years. Is he finally putting it all together?
I don't, listen, I don't want to take too much away from this horse. I do think he caught a lot of breaks in that Bluegrass to finally get it done, but I don't want to take too much away from him, only because he's been a pretty good horse right from day one, and he's just going to be a huge price again on Saturday. So if you like him and you're a believer in the Bluegrass, I think you should probably go ahead and bet him.
Matt trainer Chad Brown toyed with the idea of adding blinkers to Practical Joke following that runner-up effort in the Bluegrass. Ultimately, Chad decided no blinkers. He loomed boldly in the stretch, and then he just came up a little bit short. Personally, I was disappointed that he didn't run down IRAP late, and it kind of vindicates all the handicappers that have said a 1 1/8 is too far, let alone 1 1/4.
I've just been saying that all along. I don't think this horse wants to go this far. He's supremely talented. You can make the case he's one of the most talented 3-year-olds that we have. I just don't think distance is going to be his friend. And I guess if anyone lost in the post position draw, you can talk about Thunder Snow, who we'll talk about in a little bit with a 2-post. Practical Joke, if you're in the camp that I am and you don't believe that distance is his friend, post 19 going into the first turn, coming from off the pace, I think he can't help but be hung out to dry.
Matt J. Boy's Echo put up a big Beyer speed figure in winning the Gotham. But after that race, some handicappers looked at the race cockeyed and said he had a beautiful trip sitting behind a fast and contested pace. In the Bluegrass, the pace wasn't fast, and J. Boy's Echo, he didn't run very well. Is he a pace-dependent runner?
I don't know that he's pace-dependent. It certainly helps. Any of these horses that are going to come from sort of mid to rear, they're going to need some pace to run at. The Bluegrass, Keeneland that day, the main track was a little bit wonky. I think Speed did very well. He was coming from off of it. I'm still going to be a little bit more kind to McCracken. I don't want to completely draw a line through J. Boy's Echo, but I don't really view him as a win candidate.
Mike, what kind of horse is J. Boy's Echo?
I don't know. I think he's pretty good. I was disappointed in his Bluegrass. I think like a lot of people, I actually thought he was one of the horses who would run really well in that race, and then he didn't. It concerns me a little bit. On the other hand, you're talking about, in a race that, from my perspective, he doesn't have that many compelling long shots in it. He's maybe one of the more compelling ones, if only because, when you're playing long shots, you're looking for one reason to like him. This horse has one very big reason. He's got one very fast race.
Matt, I was disappointed with Tapwrit's non-effort in the Bluegrass. He just didn't show up at all. Yes, he was a little bit wide, didn't break very well, but I really expected a strong performance after he won a McCracken-less Tampa Bay Derby. Can he rebound for Todd?
Well, this is the question that you've got to ask yourself, or anyone that likes Tapwrit. This is a horse that, okay, the Bluegrass was a disaster, but his 2 runs at Tampa, I like both of them. The question becomes, can you forgive an effort that was so bad as your final tune-up for the biggest race of your life? I'm in the camp that says, no, I can't forgive that, but I can completely understand why somebody wants to say, you know what, everybody deserves a mulligan, give him the benefit of the doubt, and the distance should actually help him.
Pletcher has Tapwrit. He's got Always Dreaming, a prime contender off this performance in the Florida Derby. And while Always Dreaming is relatively lightly raced, he has now won a couple of 9-furlong races. So, Mike, he might have the bottom to really appreciate this 1 1/4, and he figures to be forwardly placed, maybe sitting off a really nice target and fast and accurate.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of trip he can get, because drawn sort of post 5 in the middle of all the speeds for a horse who wants to be forward. Maybe it'll work out well for him, and he'll fall into a trip, and maybe it won't. We'll see what happens with him. To me, Dan, I don't know if I really want to bet this horse in the Kentucky Derby as one of the favorites. On the other hand, I'm not so sure that he isn't one of the best 3-year-olds in the country. I mean, I like all of his races. I do like that he has 2 9-furlong wins. I think there's a chance that, listen, if anybody just turns this Kentucky Derby into a runaway, it's probably him. I'm not going to bet him. I am going to use him in the pick 4, though.
Matt, I think you agree that this horse has a tremendous amount of potential, and you said off air before we came on, if any horse is going to put on a show in this race, it might be him.
I think he's the only one. If somebody wins by 5-6 lengths, I think he's the only one that's going to be capable of doing that. The question for me, and I've kind of just talked myself into this train of thought, I wonder if he fired a shot there in that race we just saw in the Florida Derby, where he looked so impressive. It was his first time facing much better horses. He's going to face a pace Saturday afternoon that he's never seen in his life. I want to know how he's going to react to that, and we all know Pletcher, it's not that he can't win at Churchill, he can't win anywhere else, but he's so much better at Gulfstream than he is in other jurisdictions. I won't be surprised if he wins, but I won't be leaning on him.
Mike, it can be argued that Gunnevera is the best closer in this race, and we project this race to have a fast pace up front. Gunnevera, just throw out the last race. It was impossible the minute the post positions were drawn and the way he was ridden.
True enough. I'm not totally convinced Gunnevera is good enough to win the Derby, but he is a multiple graded stakes winning 2-year-old. He is a graded stakes winning 3-year-old, and he is one of the few horses in this race anyway who's coming out of, I think, a most recent prep race that's actually a better effort than it appears to be. I mean, he had no chance from that post position and the way he was ridden last time.
Unlike several of the horses in this race, Matt's State of Honor, he's got a lot of foundation. Is there any improvement left, or have we seen his best race?
I still think you could see some sort of forward move. I just don't know that Saturday is where it's going to happen, mainly because I don't think he wants any part of this distance. I think he would be greatly benefited by turning back. I wonder if they try it here, it doesn't work, maybe a race like the Woody Stevens comes into play.
Let's go to Aqueduct for the Wood Memorial, the important prep race for the Naira circuit. Irish Warcry Mike did not beat a very strong field, and this track played to his strengths because it really favored horses that were up close to the pace. That being said, visually it was very impressive, and it came back fast on the Beyer scale.
He's got 2 fast figures now, and that's a feather in this horse's cap. Obviously, he won both of those races with big figures where he had all the best of it both times. This was a very speed-favoring track, a field that I just did not care for. I don't like this Wood Memorial as a prep race overall. He's beating a horse there, a Battalion Runner, who Todd Pletcher deemed not nearly good enough to be one of his Derby starters. I don't know. I could go either way on this horse, but as a horse who's going to, be one of the shorter prices in this race, I'm against him.
Matt, let's take a look at the Timeform U.S. pace projector for this year's Kentucky Derby, and they have Irish Warcry out in front. We know he's a versatile horse. He can win from on the lead. He can win from just off of the pace. I'm not sure I want him on the lead in a situation where you see by that red notation the pace will be fast.
I agree. I don't want him on the lead if for some reason he ends up on it. I think he's the only horse that can wire the field. Having said that, I would much rather him sit off of a target like he did in the Wood Memorial. And the other thing we got to talk about with the pace projector, I mean, I understand they're taking the data that is available at the point, but as Mike said when we did the sort of reaction to the post position draw, you got to handicap the race a little bit. They've made it clear, fast and accurate, they're going to try to make the front. Whether he's fast enough or not, we'll find out. But I have a sneaky feeling that's not how the race is going to shape up.
Let's head down to the fairgrounds for the Louisiana Derby. The Louisiana Derby and the entire New Orleans road to the Triple Crown was dominated by Gervin, a horse that has nice tactical speed, able to work out good trips. And Mike, he wants to beat you.
Yeah, I like all those things about this horse. I don't love the Louisiana road to the Derby. I don't think these were the strongest prep races. He got a great trip and ride in this race, too, with a really fast pace in front of him. I like him as a horse. I just don't like him in the Derby, and obviously you have all the questions surrounding his current state of fitness.
Lots of issues surrounding his feet after this race, Matt, and we don't like how he changes back to his left lead in the lane, but he's a hardy, solid runner.
Yeah, he is, and I think that's sort of the thing that's going to get lost in the shuffle here. I mean, look, if he runs really big on Saturday, it won't get lost in the shuffle, but if he runs poorly Saturday, the feet problem is sort of taken over from a horse that really has done nothing wrong. All he does is go out. Okay, Louisiana, maybe it wasn't the strongest group, but he goes out and it was good enough to get the job done there. I think he's an honest horse. I think there is talent here, but I fear that he's just going to get kind of lost in the shuffle that, oh, well, he's had foot problem, foot problem, foot problem. He is a talented horse.
Mike, Patch ran really well in the Louisiana Derby, but he's stuck in a tough outside post position, and if you look at his speed figures, he's got a lot of improving to do.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't get a great post in this race, and because he's very, very light. He's the most lightly raced horse in the field, so let's expect him to sort of start coming forward as time goes on this year. This is a really, really tough spot for Patch.
Wasn't surprising that Gormley won the Santa Anita Derby, as we see here. He's a legitimate Grade 1 horse. He now has 2 Grade 1 victories at the Great Race Place. Matt, but what was most surprising was this race came back so slow and just looked like a staggerfest in the stretch.
I mean, just look right now. It's painful to watch the stretch run. It's kind of just crying out for someone to take this thing because they're all ready to fall down. Gormley, I think his class gets him through in this spot. I've always liked this horse. I have to be honest. I don't particularly love the way he's trending. This is 3 consecutive Beyers where he is declined, not ascended. To me, that's a bit of a problem. Look, he's won 2 Grade 1s. I think there's only one other horse in the field that can say that. I'm going to be a little bit surprised if he does win Saturday.
Mike Battle, a midway up and on the pace throughout in the Santa Anita Derby. Do you give him some extra points? I mean, Royal Mo was up and on the pace as well, and he was still hanging around at the finish.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I mean, I don't love that as the Santa Anita Derby as a prep overall. I don't love it. If you told me I just had to take one of those horses out of it, I'll take Gormley. I just think he's a better horse right now. I have no problem with the other horse who was setting the pace in there. I think he's fine, and eventually may turn out to be pretty good. I don't want him in the Derby.
The great unknown in this race is Thunder Snow, making his North American debut. We're going to see him win the UAE Derby last time out. Despite getting a little bit goofy in the stretch, he's chasing a very nice Japanese horse in Epicaris, who controlled the pace up front. Thunder Snow is going to change leads, and then he's going to start wandering around, Matt.
Yeah, and I think it was what everyone has sort of alluded to, that maybe he just caught the infield sort of big scoreboard thing they've got going. You see him drifting out now, being a little bit of a goofball, but he digs right back in and he comes and gets Epicaris, and I think everyone here is in agreement that if Epicaris were here, he would have a big chance in this Derby. If that's the case, by default, you've got to look at Thunder Snow and say he's got a big chance. And even you listen to the connections, Saeed bin Sarur, they said that this is unlike any of the other horses they've brought over from Dubai. He just seems to fit sort of the dirt mold, even though he's probably better on turf. Seems to be plenty capable on the dirt.
Very classy, very capable on the dirt. Group 1 winner on turf. Mike, he's going to be facing a pace that could be much faster than anything he's ever seen. Yeah,
I think he's a really talented horse, but there's so much working against him in this Derby. Not only that whole, UAE Derby shipping over from Dubai kind of thing that hasn't really worked out for these connections, but he's got a terrible post position down on the inside, and he's going to face a big pace in this race. There's a lot working against him, but I think he's a good horse.
Mike Hence won the Sunland Derby last time out. He won his maiden, one of the most remarkable performances you're ever going to see. And the Sunland Derby has come back as a surprisingly live race. Do you give this horse an outside chance at a price? He had a 97 buyer staring you in the face.
Sure, he's got an outside chance. Absolutely, he does. I don't love the Sunland Derby's race. I understand that it's sort of played out pretty strong with the horses that have come back to run out of it, but I think it's at least worth pointing out that the horses that came back out of that race and ran really well were the horses who were right up close to a really fast pace. This horse was not right up close to a really fast pace. He was way out of it, and he made a run. That might play well on Saturday as well. He's a pretty good horse. I don't like him that much on Saturday, though.
Matt, the connections of Fast and Accurate say, Timeform US pace projector, don't worry about it. We're going to the front.
Hey, look, you look at the Timeform US pace figures that this horse ran in the spiral. They're off the charts. He was forwardly placed, but keep in mind that was a day at Turfway where you needed to be forwardly placed if you were going to be victorious. I think he's a nice horse. I think he's in over his head here, and I think he's going to probably eventually go back to the turf of the synth.
Pick time for the Grade 1 Kentucky Derby. Matt, where are you going?
Going with Irish War Cry. The 17 post doesn't bother me at all. I'm hopeful that we can work out some sort of a trip similar to what he got in the Wood Memorial. Let the other speeds go, park out in sort of the 4-5 path going into the first turn. I'm not comparing him to him, but kind of work out the American Pharoah trip where you sit off the speeds, you try to take this thing over, turning for home. I think the other thing just to keep in the back of your mind, like Mike said, he's got 2 triple-digit buyers on his page. That's more than really anybody else in this field can say. Highest last out buyer in the field, one of the better Timeform US ratings. He's got a little bit of tactical speed. Give me Irish War Cry.
Mike Trainer, Ian Wilkes learned from a master, and Carl Nafsker on how to prep a horse. You're going with McCracken.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's exactly what the deal was with that Bluegrass last time too. I'm still not totally convinced that McCracken is every bit good enough to win a race like the Kentucky Derby. I think he's going to have to really improve and run the very best race he's ever run. On the other hand, every time I go back and look at that Bluegrass, I feel like they used that race as a means to win. I don't think you see that much anymore. These guys are trying to win the prep races. I don't really think Ian Wilkes and the connections were really trying to win the Bluegrass. I think they were trying to win this race on Saturday, and I'm hoping it works out for them.
I'm going to agree with Matt in here. I'm going to go with Irish War Cry. I love his tactical speed. He can go to the lead. He can sit from off the pace. He was visually impressive in the Wood Memorial last time out, and is one of only a handful of horses in this race that has truly run a very fast race. I'm hoping Irish War Cry works out a good trip. It'd be nice to see Rajiv Mirage, who's had so many physical problems, get into the winner's circle in a big race like the Kentucky Derby. I went 17, 2, 5, and 8. Craig Milkowski, Timeform US. I know he's been looking at the Kentucky Derby. He's also been looking at a very interesting sprint race on the undercard, the Grade 2 Churchill Downs Stakes. Let's go to that segment right now.